just realize something that perhaps I've realized before, but not in this way. When we are healing and we recognize where our limiting beliefs or a thought process or a behavior comes from, sometimes we can become in disbelief that, does it really come from that? And then we fall in self-guilt, self-shame, self-blame. There are healing processes that you might go through that you might not fall into that. But I believe that all healing processes needs to come to a completion. And the stages that I see is that forgiveness in general, self-forgiveness in others, is the final step. When you actually get to forgiveness, it's not the final step, it's the step before final step. But when you actually get to forgiveness, whether there's yourself or both, you actually realize that you didn't need to forgive yourself or anyone. That forgiveness is almost like cancelled out, because it makes you realize that nothing that we've done has been on purpose. Nothing that they done has been on purpose. And you actually see the silver lining of the divine through unconditional love. And you also see that silver lining going through the person and yourself and getting distorted in the subconscious and manifesting in a reality very distorted. And then you realize that no one is to blame. No one is to shame, no one is to guilt, not even yourself. And then you forgive. And then when you forgive, you realize there's no need to forgive. Because forgiveness still comes from the process of guilting something. Yeah? You do something, you say, I'm sorry. It's a duality. Forgiveness is duality. But when you get at the end of that duality, you fall into the unconditional love, and that is the end of the process for that specific healing. But in between, maybe before you feel guilty, if you feel self-guilt through something that you are uncovering about yourself, or you don't feel self-guilty for something that you are uncovering about yourself, there is a fine layer in between there of resentment. Because I've noticed that I've healed very deep stuff. Some I've gone through self-guilt before I realized that I didn't need to, and some I didn't have to go through that process, but somehow the cycle still repeats itself, but in a much lighter, subtle way. It's not as intense, the energy just doesn't come on as intense, the emotions doesn't come on as intense, and I understand a lot more, a much deeper perception of that situation, but there's something still there repeating itself, and I'm questioning, why is that coming through? And digging in, I found that I was feeling resentment for that version of myself, for either having to go through that, for either not understanding how that version of myself allowed herself to go through that, for having to go through that. And that resentment doesn't, you know, it's almost like the background feeling of self-guilt, self-shame, self-blame. It's not much different. It's just that you don't see those more dense self-guilt, self-shame, self-blame as the main core of your reason for going through that. But there is a lesser, denser space where we can fall into that can cause resentment and frustration as well. I would add frustration in there as well. So it's important to understand if there's resentment into any of your repeating cycles, because if it is, there's still a little bit of healing to do, a little bit of awareness to go through, a little bit of digging to go through, and ask the universe to show you through the day, through your week, is there any moment that I'm still feeling resentment? And what the universe is going to do is it's going to show you. you're going to see, you're going to listen, you're going to hear it. You might feel the energy imprint of resentment in your body. So then when you go to the situation again, you will recognize through the energy imprint, or you might recognize through this perception in your subconscious that, yeah, that is resentment, and you'll be able to work through that again. And remember, we always dealing with trauma bonds, so feeling one way can always link to feeling another way, and it might uncover the other way that you've been feeling but you're not realized. So be open, but take a leap of faith. And this is the energy that's coming through today very, very strongly, is to take that leap of faith, to not literally consciously skip the self-guilt, self-blame, self-shame by going into forgiveness practice. And even if it still doesn't feel like you can forgive yourself or others, to skip and trust. Find that trust within yourself to skip and fall into that forgiveness, and stay on that forgiveness and gratitude for a bit longer, just a little bit longer. And it might bring you more awareness and perceptions of where you can go then from that point. And I'm sure it'll be the way forward. You're not going to go back to feeling guilty and blamed and shamed, or even resentment. And sometimes it's okay to use spiritual bypass. I call it spiritual bypass, because we have this inner knowledge, and applying the knowledge sometimes isn't a bad thing. Is when we're applying the knowledge for everything, and then skipping grief, skipping sadness, skipping the feeling of loneliness that might come up, skipping the feeling of frustration, of anger. When we are skipping because we're applying and putting ourselves in a certain place all the time, we don't feel through. But when we've done the healing, when we have felt through, you've been through the self-guilt, self-shame, self-blame, you don't need to go through that again. Sometimes we can condition ourselves to keep going there. And I'm asking you to decondition yourself from going there, and going somewhere else is slightly different, slightly more high vibrational, because that little bit more high vibrational might show you a different perspective, a more expansive perspective. And as long as you're using spiritual bypass consciously, then you have this powerful tool for manifesting your reality. When you're blindly using spiritual bypass, that's where it can be a bit deceiving for yourself. So I think the message here is sometimes take that leap, take that choice, that free choice. It's a free choice to say, right, something just came on to me, I realize this, I will not fall into self-guilt, I will go straight to self-forgiveness. How much can I stay there? How much can I learn from this? But feeling through everything as you go along, of course, never shutting down your emotions or your feelings that comes through your body, because healing doesn't happen unless every sensation has come through your body. So even on self-forgiveness, you might be releasing the self-guilt, but you are in self-forgiveness consciously. You're cultivating that consciously, so your body can release all the self-guilt and self-blame and self-shame and the frustration and the resentment. And it works. And it works. So I hope this can open you up to just trying. And just remember that all of this can only be of assistance to you if we are practicing being in our hearts, in the little moments, in the good moments, in the simple moments, in the tough moments. But if we can practice being in your heart chakra in little moments, and I say this all the time, washing your dishes, making the bed, doing the laundry, driving, just activate that heart chakra and expand and see how long you can expand for. Is it 10 seconds? Is it 2 minutes? And do it several times through the day. Remind yourself to do it. You need to condition yourself in a way to remind yourself to do it. We are all here talking about deconditioning ourselves. But unfortunately, the conscious and the subconscious mind work with conditioning. And we can use that conditioning tool to condition ourselves to do things in a different way, to do things in an easier way, to do things in a more expansive way. Because we're still here human on this earth, living through a mind. And we need to befriend our mind. We need to befriend our fears. We all have anger, and there is healthy anger out there. Anger is a way of protecting yourself. But excessive, suppressive, out of proportion anger, then something to look at. But what I'm trying to bring here is sometimes we need to condition ourselves to do things a certain way, like routine, like a spiritual practice, to be able to get going, but we need to also be aware that we're not falling then into a conditioning that is just set in stone, because energies are forever changing. We are receiving energy from the universe all the time to help us expand into more ways of thinking, or better way of thinking, in more in-depth ways of thinking. So if we condition yourself for one thing, we have to be aware that we'll be deconditioning that soon enough, yeah, even for the good stuff. So it's about just being aware that things are changing, and we want to change with the energies. I just see that so clearly, and that's why my passion to come here and share. And I would like you to have a look at the link for my book. My book is very good at bringing those awareness and tools, and for you to practice, for you to understand, for you to apply to yourself in ways that are expensive. And it's just daily practice, understanding of your own healing process, because you're going to create your own healing process. So I highly recommend for you to have a look. It's not a book that you read cover to cover. It's a book that you open and just whatever page it falls, it's what you need to on that day. And the link is down below. And I also offer a free group meditation, and also that's where I send channel messages for those willing to share their heart in the group about what they need in terms of clarity. And yeah, can't wait to see you there. Send you love and light.